of Springfield, Oregon, life moved slowly. The town was a reflection of American suburbia, a place where parents still waved to their children as they left for school, and kids played in their front yards without fear. But in this quiet, tight-knit community, one fateful day would forever alter the lives of its residents, a day that shattered the illusion of peace and safety. On May 21, 1998, Springfield would become the site of one of the most tragic school shootings in U.S. history. This is the story of Kip Kinkel, a troubled young man whose path toward violence seemed inevitable. A boy, once filled with potential, who ultimately became a symbol of a growing national crisis. The desperate need to understand and intervene in the mental health struggles that affect so many of our youth. This is a story about mental illness, isolation, family struggles, and the ultimate consequences of ignoring warning signs. It is a story of how a single day in May 1998 would forever change the lives of an entire community, and how the tragic events of that day would reverberate through the years that followed. Kip Kinkel was born on August 30, 1982, to William and Faith Kinkel. He was the second of two children, a seemingly normal child in a seemingly normal family. William, a software engineer, and Faith, a school teacher, were both highly educated and well-respected members of their community. Together, they raised two children, Kip and his older sister, who, by all accounts, led a much more stable and successful life. The Kinkel family lived in a comfortable home in Springfield, where William worked hard as a software engineer and Faith taught at a local school. From an early age, Kip exhibited intelligence and creativity, especially in his love for music. His parents supported his interests, and by the time he was 10, Kip had already demonstrated a talent for playing the violin. In those early years, Kip seemed like a typical bright child. His love of learning and creativity stood out. He was often praised for his musical ability and his focus in the classroom. But as Kip entered adolescence, the cracks began to show. Cracks that, despite the best efforts of his family and teachers, would widen with time. As Kip entered his teenage years, a shift began to occur within him. He started to struggle with his emotions in ways that were not entirely obvious to those around him. He became more withdrawn, retreating into himself, and found it increasingly difficult to connect with his peers. His once vibrant personality became overshadowed by a pervasive sense of sadness and frustration. Though Kip excelled academically, particularly in subjects that interested him, he found it increasingly difficult to navigate the social complexities of adolescence. Social isolation became a recurring theme in Kip's life. While his classmates were forming friendships and engaging in extracurricular activities, Kip remained a loner, often feeling like an outsider. As Kip's social isolation grew, so too did his feelings of anger and frustration. His emotional world became darker and more difficult to penetrate. This was when the depression began to manifest more clearly, but Kip's pain remained mostly invisible to his family and friends. Despite his parents' love and concern, Kip's internal struggles were becoming harder to manage. Kip's parents recognized that something was wrong. They enrolled him in therapy, where he began speaking about his feelings of hopelessness and anger. He also started taking antidepressant medications, hoping to ease his struggles. But instead of improving, Kip's condition worsened. He became fascinated with violence. He began to watch violent movies and play violent video games obsessively. His fascination with weapons, particularly guns, intensified. Though his parents tried to intervene, they were unaware of the depths of Kip's growing obsession with violence. The more Kip retreated into these violent worlds, the more his anger began to consume him. He lost touch with reality and fell deeper into a space of rage and isolation. He began reading about wars, studying the history of violence, and delving into the details of firearms, their mechanics, and their potential for destruction. As Kip's emotional struggles deepened, so too did the strain on his family. Despite their best efforts, William and Faith were at a loss for how to help their son. Kip's increasingly erratic behavior and withdrawal from family life put a tremendous strain on their relationship. Kip's behavior had become difficult to ignore. He had been expelled from school several times for violent outbursts and disturbing behavior. Yet, the severity of his mental state seemed to go unnoticed by the broader community. William and Faith, both well-educated and professional, knew their son was struggling, but were unable to find the right solution. They reached out for help, but it always felt as if they were chasing shadows. The therapies and medications were ineffective, and Kip seemed to become more and more angry. Kip felt misunderstood, trapped in a world that seemed alien to him. His family's attempts to communicate with him only pushed him further away, and so, his internal rage continued to build. On the night of May 20th, 1998, Kip's rage reached its breaking point. After hours of planning and brooding, he made the decision that would forever change his life and the lives of countless others. In the dead of night, Kip took a .22 caliber handgun, a weapon that his father had unknowingly bought for him, and murdered his mother, Faith, and his father, William. The horrific murder of his parents was not a spur-of-the-moment act. It was the culmination of months of planning and rage, a dark reflection of Kip's growing detachment from reality. What made this act even more chilling was the fact that Kip didn't flee the scene. He stayed in the house with the bodies of his parents for hours. At one point, he even ate dinner while their lifeless bodies lay in the next room. This was a boy in the depths of a psychological breakdown, a boy who had descended into a world where violence was the only means of escaping his inner torment. On the morning of May 21st, 1998, Kip went to Thurston High School as though nothing had happened. He went about his routine, got dressed, and carried with him a semi-automatic rifle, a .22 caliber handgun, and a .223 caliber rifle, all of which he had obtained with the help of his father. At 7:57 a.m., Kip walked into the school cafeteria, where students were gathered for breakfast. Without warning, he pulled out his weapons and opened fire. The sound of gunfire echoed through the cafeteria. Students screamed in terror and scrambled for safety. Two students, 17-year-old Ben Walker and 16-year-old Mikael Nikolausen, lost their lives in the attack. Another 25 students were injured, some of them severely, with life-altering wounds. As Kip made his way through the school, his mind remained focused on one thing: chaos. He opened fire in the halls, targeting anyone in his path. Kip's rampage was only stopped when he encountered police officers outside the school. Kip Kinkel was arrested without further incident. But the question remained: why? How had this seemingly ordinary teenager been driven to such a horrific act of violence? In the aftermath of the shooting, the investigation revealed disturbing details about Kip's background. Kip's journals, filled with ramblings about violence and death, painted a portrait of a troubled mind that had been spiraling for years. His obsession with weapons, his desire for attention, and his feelings of isolation and alienation were all evident in his writings. Kip's trial would reveal that he had been planning the attack for months, and that his thoughts had grown increasingly violent. He had spent hours researching firearms, looking up bomb-making instructions, and mapping out the school's layout. But despite his apparent obsession with violence, Kip never sought out help for the deeper emotional issues that were consuming him. The legal proceedings that followed Kip's arrest sparked intense debate across the nation. Many questioned how such a horrific act could have been prevented. The prosecution argued that Kip should be held fully responsible for his actions, while the defense tried to argue that Kip's mental health issues and the lack of intervention had played a critical role in his descent into violence. Kip was eventually sentenced to 111 years in prison without the possibility of parole. But for the families of the victims, there was no real closure. The wounds of May 21st, 1998 would never fully heal. The Kip Kinkel tragedy raises difficult questions about mental health, access to firearms, and the role of the community in identifying and addressing the needs of troubled youth. How could this young man, who seemed to have everything going for him, have fallen so far? Could more have been done to intervene before it was too late? Though the tragedy cannot be undone, it serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of recognizing the warning signs of mental illness. Kip Kinkel's story serves as a call for greater awareness, intervention, and support for those who are struggling with emotional and psychological issues. The community of Springfield, Oregon, will never forget what happened on that tragic day in May, but they have also worked tirelessly to heal, to rebuild, and to ensure that the lessons learned from Kip Kinkel's tragedy are never forgotten. In the end, Kip's story is one of loss, pain, and missed opportunities, but it also serves as a testament to the strength of a community in the face of unspeakable tragedy, a reminder that we must do better for our children, for our families, and for our future.